everybody? Welcome back to Around the Draft. We're going to be doing our receiver episode today, which is what I've been waiting for the most. I feel like I can speak for pretty much everybody. It's the part of the class that is the most stacked, the most just talent rich. As much as this class, I think, is very good. This is kind of what sets it apart, I think, from the past couple of years, is having a premium talent pool at a premium position like receiver in today's game. I know I'm really excited about it, guys. I know you guys probably are too. We're doing our top 10, which was difficult. And normally you think you top 10 guys like, oh, you can get to like 10. And like usually once you get down that far, it's pretty easy to determine guys from there. Not so much for me. I don't know about you guys. It's difficult as hell to get to 10. There's guys I have right outside the top 10 that definitely have an argument to be in my top 10. So I'm sure you guys dealt with the same thing. But before we kick things off, I wanted to shout out Baker Mayfield for getting his contract with the Buccaneers. I know that our boy JT is probably, I don't know. I assume I don't know where he stood on Baker. I think he's pretty probably happy with that deal. It was a very team friendly deal in my opinion, at least. But again, that'll be more for my other show that I do on Saturdays, our NFL show. We'll talk about that next week. But for now, guys, want to jump into the receiver talk. Is there any guys that you guys had outside of your top 10 that you wanted to shout out ahead of time? Maybe gives us a glimpse of who's going to be in your top 10, or did you guys want to jump right into our top 10 this year?
I'll go ahead and jump in. I don't have them in my top 10, but I do want to shout out the latter two of the Washington trio. I think Jalen McMillan are both going to be solid. I think they project to be solid NFL receivers. They just missed the cut on my top 10, but I do like both players. I think they're going to be guys who are very understated in terms of like where they get drafted and then the effect that they could have on an NFL roster.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I do think those guys are really good. They were just outside of mine as well. I think they were closer to like 15 or so range. But again, in this class, that does not mean that you're not only draftable, but probably like a mid-round receiver, honestly, in this class. So no problems with those guys at all. Anyone else you guys want to shout out that's not in your top 10?
I'll give one. My wide receiver 11 is Malachi Corley.
Okay.
But I think he's going to be a sneaky good pick in this draft. He has a few negatives with, I think, his footwork, and kind of his awareness as a route runner that I think kept him out of my top 10. But he does, I think, a lot of things really well that will translate well at the NFL level. So I think he could be a mid-round steal, I would say. But with how good the receivers are in this draft, I think, even though there's so many, he could still go pretty high.
Yeah, I had him at 12. I don't know about the rest of you guys. Maybe he's higher or lower, but I had him at 12. I think the problem with him ultimately is that he definitely still looks like a running back playing receiver, and not necessarily in a way that's like going to make him not usable in the next level. It just, he does lack the nuance of things. I think his route running definitely has ways to go yet, but if used properly in the right system, I would hate to see this happen just because I think that it would make them even more ridiculous. But if people always try to like compare him to Debo, he's not Debo. But I think if a team like the Niners took him and used him as like that gadget type of player, I think he'd be really valuable for them there. Probably could play some running back snaps too, occasionally, obviously having that experience and the body type to do that. But yeah, it's definitely a good shout out there. Anybody you have, Dalton, you wanted to throw out there?
Yeah, speaking of like mid-round guys and guys that I think aren't going to be like number ones for anybody, but will be reliable receivers in this league for a while, Brendan Rice.
Okay.
I think, he doesn't do anything spectacular. And I think, the last name kind of just automatically makes people like a little bit disappointed in what he's in.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
But I mean, there's nothing really like alarming to his game. He does what he needs to do. He makes the plays he's supposed to. I don't think he doesn't get a ton of separation, but that was also as USC's top receiver. I think if you put him, as your number 3 and you get him on a nickel, I think he's going to be a guy that can, be relatively productive for you, be like a 50, 60 catch a year guy in the league.
I could see that. I think he's a good possession type receiver. I don't think he's going to offer you much separation or run after catch, but he's got a good body type and body size there to be able to kind of work his way into situations where he can throw him the football and contest a catch. But JT just chimed in actually. Who's the wide receiver, running back? Packers? Ty Montgomery is who you're thinking of, JT. Yeah, you're right there. Not a bad comp for honestly Corley. I think that if even though Montgomery wasn't always very productive, played a long time. I think he played. He was on a roster last year, or the year before, so like wouldn't be a bad comp for him actually. So throw that out there. But yeah, guys, I think the one that I want to shout out, and this is more so about the fact I think that you guys will probably have him in your top 10, and I do not at this point. Combined with like watching more of him and also just kind of other guys elevating themselves. Troy Franklin is number 11 for me right now.
Interesting.
So obviously the combine performance is not the only reason for that. He definitely looked very stiff and it did not look very comfortable for him catching the ball and running through the drills. When you watch him play, I don't think that he's as fast as I'd like him to be if he's going to be that pure deep threat type of guy, which I think is what he is kind of being billed as we go through the draft process, which he can get deep down the field. It's not that he won't do that occasionally and do a good job of that. I just don't know if I love the hands consistency. I don't think he's going to be able to handle physicality very well with his frame. I think he's not as tall as they were saying, which is kind of good for his weight, but his weight is still in the 170s. I don't think he's the type of route runner to get away with that, like a guy like Smith for the Eagles is and stuff like that. It's not quite the collection of skills that I would love to see in a guy that is going to probably go as high as he's going to go. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned his name. One other guy real quick, Johnny Wilson. I have no idea what to do with him. I think he could end up being like an awesome big slot receiver, or he's going to be just not able to actually play receiver and has to like be a tight end. I have no idea what to do with him. It's kind of a crapshoot, but I did want to mention his name. I like some of the stuff. Like he moves better than he should, especially as a route runner at times. But again, it's just the hands thing. There's a lot of concerns with him, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up on the right team and produces pretty well. So I don't know what you guys think about him, though. Any thoughts on him?
I'll jump in. Funny Johnny Wilson. I can't help it, especially because of the size and then the helmet. I just keep seeing like Kelvin Benjamin.
Yeah,
and,
I mean,
and I think the fact I think the fact that Kelvin Benjamin actually had like somewhat
some
of
success
an NFL career,
yeah.
I feel like Johnny Wilson definitely has a shot to be, a productive player, particularly because the athletic profile is just like
it's good for his size. It is. It's just, again, I just don't know what to do with him. Like I don't know what teams are going to think about him. I'm curious how early he goes, but I think he helped himself at the combine definitely with how he looked, but we'll see how that goes. But all right, guys, let's jump into our top 10 here first. I'll kick things off because I always make you guys kick things off. But I'll say for me, so top 10 receivers, again, was very difficult. I went at 10, and we talked a little bit pre-show. Dalton said about how his guy is a traits guy. Mine is kind of the opposite. I went with Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. I think this guy is just really good at pretty much everything that I saw him being asked to do, especially his last year at Florida. And with the quarterback play he got, as much as Mertz played better than he did at Wisconsin, as a Wisconsin fan, I was not exactly thrilled for Florida when they decided to go to him as the transfer portal quarterback for them. Made some improvements as a passer, but still just wasn't that great. I think he did a really good job within that passing offense to kind of lead them there. And I don't even have to talk about the one catch against Charlotte. Like that is one of maybe the best of all time at either level. That you guys know what I'm talking about. The kind of like Odell-esque grab against Charlotte. Now it's against Charlotte, but you got popped by two guys while catching it like backhanded like this. I'm gonna pay attention to stuff like that. I just think he's going to be a really good slot type. I think he can play a little bit outside, but he did play a lot of the snaps in the slot in college. I think that was for good reason. I think he's not the fastest guy in the world, but he does have enough speed to be a run after catch threat. He had a little bit of punt return success there too. It's kind of like all aroundness of his game, basically. Like I think he's going to be able to step in and handle a good amount of targets if someone needs a slot receiver. But any thoughts on him?
Yeah, I like him. He wasn't in my top 10, but I'm still pretty high on him. I'm a little worried about his ability to create separation, but he catches the ball really well in traffic, so I think that kind of makes up for it a little bit. But yeah, I think he's going to be somebody that can be used in a lot of different ways. So I don't think it'll be too hard for him to succeed in the NFL.
Yeah, he's not super physically imposing, but he finds a way to get open. He finds a way to get open.
Very crafty player, which is really, if you're going to not have elite physical traits, I think you have to have that. But he tested really well too. Like I think
He
his
did.
physical traits are better
Mhm.
than maybe we think about, just because the way he played and the way he won. But he's definitely got enough, I think, to him. Is he in any of your top tens, or am I alone in that?
He was 11 for me, but
Okay.
yeah, like you said, he had a great combine. I mean, his 40 time, he ran the same 40 times Troy Franklin.
Yeah, which I mean, I do think Franklin is faster than him, but it's
Yeah.
again part of it again is I think Franklin isn't quite as fast as I maybe thought he would be, but still, I think they're closer than maybe we thought, which is a little weird between those two
Yeah.
players. But how about you, Felix? Is he outside your top 10 or
Yeah, no, I was gonna say actually I have him at number 8.
number 8? Okay, so you
Yeah,
can give your spiel on him now.
actually,
Then
I really liked his tape from what I watched. I think he is you kind of hit the nail on the head on my thoughts. Just he does everything really well. Feel like jack of all trades, master of none. I feel like he's creative enough in his releases, and he works like blind spots really well on
yeah,
corners.
he's a very
And I think
smart
that's
player.
something that's really going to help him uh like probably succeed not just in the slot, but maybe be able to move him around and put him outside as well. And my thing too is when I watch receivers, there's a lot of things that I look for, but the fact that he can get open and like Jake brought up the contested catch, like he
Yeah,
always finds a way to kind of position himself, I think, properly and in the best way for like his quarterback to get him. And that savviness, like understanding positioning, body control to be able to elevate and like put yourself in the path of the ball. And I felt like he had consistent hands on top of that. That's something that I think is going to make him like a pretty stable player. I think he could have a really solid career, be like a good like number 2. And yeah, I just thought I thought highly of him already, and I felt like he was going to be a guy in my top 10 prior to the combine. And then, of course, it's the underwear Olympics, but like
yeah.
seeing the measurables in the combine, it was like, okay, yeah, like the speed and everything we see on tape is legitimate, and you could add NFL coaching on top of that to probably extrapolate just a little bit more from his potential. So I think he's going to be a solid pick wherever he ends up.
Yeah, that's pretty much again how I thought about him. I think he could come in and be like ideally number 3 target for an offense, kind of be either the primary slot or at least the guy that's getting the third most targets, and could eventually be a number 2. But more importantly, I think a team that is kind of feels good about their top 2 receivers, but doesn't really know what to do with slot receiver or just that third target in the passing game. I think he could be a really good target for all those guys. But let's go to top 10 for you, Felix. Who's your 10th guy then? Oh, muted still, Felix, just so you know. There you go.
Whoops. My
There
10th guy is Xavier Worthy.
Okay. All right.
Nice.
Really like the speed, obviously. I mean, it's the next level player in terms of not just speed, but understanding like how to throttle up and down his speed and manipulate it, in order to kind of lull DBs to sleep and that type of thing. I think my thing though is and I don't know if it's wrong to do this, but the archetype of player that he is just really hard to get over. I mean, I'm not seeing a guy who, one, I mean, rail thin frame,
Yes.
two, very, very fast, obviously, but three, I don't see like an expansive route runner, a la like Ricky Pearsall, or like I don't know if he's in anybody's top 10. He's not in mine, but he's close. But like Roman Wilson, where I see a guy who's able to like use his feet really well and has that body control to understand, like I said, positioning, not just the pacing on your route, but like how are you going to maybe use that like head fake or that shoulder shimmy or whatever it is in order to like get by a guy and get open. I just don't see that in Xavier Worthy's game. And to me, he's just going to be a dude who ends up either being a fast gadget player, dude who takes the top off of defense, or he ends up with the Chiefs and completely blows away what I'm saying right now and has 1,000 yards. But yeah,
Right.
it's the archetype of player for me, the guys who are all like incredibly fast in a straight line like that we've seen. and blow up even at the collegiate level. If they're smaller, the translation doesn't seem to happen. It's like as soon as you get your hands on them, you're slowing them up, and then their best trait is just eliminated because all that speed is gone and they got to get to 100 again, So, yeah, I like the potential, and I think the physical traits are so enticing, but I just don't see a guy that I want as my like number one, number two, consistent down to down, week in, week out as a target. So yeah, he's 10 for me.
Yeah, I have him at 9. I don't know where do you guys have him? If you have him in your top 10, any of you?
He's 10 for me also.
10, so 10, 9, 9. Okay. So let's talk about him a little bit here more then. I think for me, the main thing with Worthy is I do think that the deep speed trait with him is on tape. Like you can tell that this guy has the ability to separate down the field in particular and get open and allow guys to be able to air it out down the field to him. So I think if he goes to the right team that can take advantage of that consistently, like a Buffalo or Mahomes, like playing with Mahomes, Kansas City, or some of the other big arm quarterbacks, or these guys that are able to accurately put the ball down the field, I think he could become a really good number 2, number 3-ish type of target. I think, like you said, Felix, the problem is I don't know what else he's going to do at the next level that's going to elevate him beyond that. His contested catch rate is abysmal for the amount of targets he got. I think he was like 5 for 21 this past year, if I'm not mistaken. He's not going to be that type of guy who's going to be able to deal with physicality very well. He catches the ball well. He only had like a 6% drop rate, so I'm not worried about when he's open getting in the football, and you can get him open maybe on some other routes that you play him as a Z, try to get guys not be able to press him, allow him to run free on cross or stuff like that. There's ways to get him the ball in ways that they didn't really do a ton at Texas. But again, a lot of that is going to be on him figuring out how to run different routes other than what he did to Texas and get open in ways he wasn't getting open. It's really, really landing spot dependent, I think, for him in terms of how good he's going to be.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think it really depends on what type of role he's in, whether he's going to succeed or not. But I love a lot of the things I see. Felix kind of mentioned it earlier, but his ability to, like, there's a lot of fast receivers that just know to go fast, but his ability to change up his pace is pretty nice.
He does have that going for him.
Yeah. His route tree is not very expansive at all, but I mean, that's kind of leads me back into like, it depends on what role he's going to be in. My main worry with him is press coverage.
Yeah,
because
I don't think
frame,
he can play
he's gonna have to work on his footwork in order to be a better route runner and to get out of press coverages. Because with his speed, if he can just develop some better footwork, I think it'll help him. But yeah, he does a lot of things well, and his speed is something that I think will make defenses play differently when he's on the field and when he's not on the field, because you have to account for that.
Yeah.
But he needs to go to the right situation, I think.
Yeah.
I actually don't see him very differently than like Jalen Hyatt last year. Like, I think they're both very similar, honestly, in terms of like, you don't get a lot of different things from them, but the thing they do well, they probably can succeed at. It's just, will they be given the opportunity in the right offense? But go ahead, Dalton. I'm sorry. You were
I mean, the thing is, like, he's just so fast that, like, that when you're that fast, I mean, everyone in the NFL is fast, but when you're that fast, it really does. I mean, it's a huge advantage. Yeah. And, definitely press is going to be a worry, but like a lot of the tape, I mean, he did manage to find ways to avoid jams here and there, mostly because of the threat of his speed, but he was able to at least get around that initial jam for the most part from what I saw. And I think his speed is going to really make teams worried about jamming him at the line, because if you miss, he's gone.
Right, for sure. And I think if you play him as a Z or in the slot, because he had about 40% of his snaps from the slot this past year, like I think him playing from the slot and being able to run vertical from the slot might actually be the best thing for him early on, because you're going to get a lot of free releases. You're going to be able to deal with the two-way go against slot corners that are not ever going to be as fast as him. Let's be honest about it. Like, they're going to have to either play off of him or they're going to have help. And it affects how defenses play you, like he talked about, guys. Like, I think him being on the field, if he's able to have a little bit of success with those things, all of a sudden now the defense has to worry about it, and it does affect everything else around you. And even if he ends up being kind of more of a decoy than anything else at times, even as a rookie, that still is going to be making an impact to some degree, right? Like I think about early on in his career, not as much now, even though he did just catch a touchdown to win the Super Bowl. Mecole Hardman kind of had that going on for him with the Chiefs, where like, yeah, he didn't make a ton of plays, but when he did, they were big plays, and they affected how defenses played them, especially with Hill on the field with them too. Like, I think he has a role. It's just again, how big of one is he going to have? So that's definitely a question. So I know that he was 10 for it was Felix and Jake, right? You guys had him at 10?
Yeah.
Okay. And then he was 9 for you and I, Dalton. Okay, so we'll keep track of that. We don't want to spend too much time. So Dalton, who was your 10? I don't know if we said your 10.
So I said before the show, I like traits, and I do think after 9 for me, there is a little bit of a drop off.
Okay.
And I kind of went with the guy that I think is the best athlete out of that next group, which by far is Devontae Walker.
Okay.
He is just, he's a guy where it's funny. I first started watching him when I was watching, Drake May tape.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a guy you turn on a North Carolina game for the Drake May tape, and he does just kind of jump off the screen a little
The
bit.
speed is definitely
The speed's there, the strength, and I mean he's got a good build. I think he's really a guy. I mean, there's definitely some polish that needs to be there yet, but I mean, he has the size and speed to be effective in the NFL.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Like I will say that. I'm not sure if you guys have him on your list. I know he was not in my top 10. But if he's not, I did want to take a second to talk about him then. So for me, the physical traits are there, like I said, Dalton. I have no questions about his physical ability to be even maybe a high-end receiver in the NFL. It's just his tape this past year when it comes to catching the football, when it comes to some of the route running stuff, even though it's good at times. I just wonder if he's got the natural ability as a receiver to succeed as more than like a third option. That's kind of what it comes down to. If you go back and look at his tape prior to this year, it does look a little better for sure. And I know people have talked about that. The problem is it's a couple years from that, like at this point, since we've seen that version of him. Is that who he actually is, or is he more of this guy that has some clunkiness to him but can make big plays, has physical traits? So I get definitely banking on that. I think that's probably closer to when he'll be coming off the board because of those physical traits. I wouldn't be surprised if he's closer to 10 than maybe the 15 or so range that I have him in. But I do, again, understand why you kind of go in that direction. And once you get to 10 in this class, even though I think this class is very good. So, but any thoughts you guys had on Walker before we get going?
I had him he's my wide receiver 8.
Okay, so you do have
him. I'm pretty high on him.
Okay, cool. So you guys go there then, yeah.
All the concerns I think are valid, and I understand not having him in the top 10. His route tree and his route running, I think both aren't on the same wavelength as a lot of the other receivers in the top 10. But kind of like Dalton said, for me, it's all his traits.
Yeah, he has traits
that do it for me, because I can't see him not at least being like a somewhat consistent playmaker just because of his traits. Even if he doesn't develop the route running and some other things he needs to work on, I still think his floor is pretty high just because of those traits.
Gotcha. Yeah. Good. Any thoughts you had, Felix, with him?
Yeah, I was gonna jump in. I don't have him in my top 10, but I do really like his game, and I think what sticks out to me the most is like Jake said in watching like some Drake May tape, like he really obviously stands out because there's like nothing else at UNC. It's like there's no other real talent that's there, and
the tight end's pretty good with Nesbitt.
Yeah, he's pretty
other
solid.
than him.
But Walker's like a really I don't know, I just describe him as a gamer. Like he's one of those guys that even if he's not open, he's going to put in the effort to make the catch. He's like every down till the end of the game. He's running hard, and I don't know, like you see it on tape. Like there's good speed there, good size profile, and he always seemed to be kind of in sync with May, even in like certain moments where May has to bail from the pocket, and like you see the alertness of Tez like coming back to him and like trying to make the play a little bit easier for him. I think that sort of like heads up kind of play can really translate to the NFL level. So I don't know if I see like a consistent week to week, like starter level guy just yet, but I think he's someone who could definitely grow into a player because you see like the effort, you see like the sort of unsung stuff, like the my quarterback is bailing from the pocket. Let me abandon what the hell I'm doing and just get open. You know, like that type of awareness is very valuable. You got guys that just won't even react to the quarterback bailing. You know what I mean? So he seems like he wants to be that go-to guy for his quarterback. And that's kind of what sticks out to me on tape. So I don't have him in my top 10, but just like you said earlier, there's so many good receivers in this class. I mean, like my
It doesn't
number
mean that he's not good. But
yeah, my number 16 guy I could end up like really loving too, you know. So yeah, he's a good player.
I think I kind of think of him in the same way I kind of think of Troy Franklin, where I like what they've shown at the college level. I just don't know if it's going to one translate as well to the NFL, and two, like, is the hands consistency and the natural receiving ability there enough to take him, earlier than some of these other guys that I'm more confident about that with. So, but again, talent's there. We'll see if someone can unlock him. Maybe he ends up. Who knows? Maybe if you really like him a lot, maybe May will vouch for him, and it'll be like a Tank Dell type of thing. Granted, Tank Dell didn't play with CJ Stroud, but CJ Stroud wanted him badly, and that worked out just fine. So we'll see if something like that might happen. So I think we've all gone through our 9 and 10s at this point, if I'm not mistaken. Right? Is anyone?
I
I
have
think we have.
my 9. I haven't.
Oh, you haven't talked. Okay, so we'll
yeah.
actually go to you then, Jake. You give us
Okay.
your 9 because I think I've got mine. Yeah.
I have another Texas receiver at the end of my top 10 here. It's A.D. Mitchell.
Okay, 9. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
He's above Worthy for me because he's more of a developed route runner, and I think he's really, really smart. Just watching his tape, he seems to. I don't really know how to describe it, but he just has he knows the game of football well.
Smart route runner.
Yeah.
You can tell he looked for one thing I'll say with real quick is I think of his route running, the thing that stands out the most is his ability to attack blind spots on corners. Like he's very good at figuring out, okay, where does this corner have leverage on me? Where does he not? Can I defeat that leverage by kind of giving him this sort of kind of move here real quick, even though I'm not going this way? Like that type of little nuanced stuff for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I like a lot of the things he does. I'd like to see him high point the ball a little more consistently. I think he could be better in those high traffic kind of areas. But that's kind of what puts him down toward the bottom of my list. But you guys have already said it, but it's just a stacked class. In another class, he would definitely be higher than 9 for me. But yeah.
Fair enough. So we'll have the A.D. Mitchell conversation right now. Then I guess got crosswords. I'm assuming he's in all of our top 10s. I don't think I have to ask that.
Yeah.
But where do you have him? I'll ask you first.
I have him a very close 6, and I have him very close to my 4 and 5 guys.
Okay.
The only flaw, like Jake, you kind of pinpointed it. The only flaw I really saw was that he does tend to let the ball get in too close to him. Sometimes I'd like to see him go out and get it, attack it with his hands more. I think he let some passes get broken up that I think that I would have liked to see him reach out and snag. But I do think he has everything you want really in a number 1. The physical traits are all there. The speed, he is a lot faster than you thought he'd be. And at Texas, Xavier Worthy ended up getting a lot of the production, but Mitchell was the number 1 guy. You could definitely tell that defenses were terrified of him. By the time he got further on into the year, defenses were shading to him all the time. And he's just a problem. He finds a way to get open. His release is very good. He does everything really well. He's a very savvy route runner. I saw there was this one red zone play I was watching. You could tell he felt like he was going to run he saw where the ball was going to end up going, and he just stopped his route on the goal line because he knew he was going to run his defender right into a pass breakup or a pick. And so he just stopped his route and easy slant over the other side for a touchdown. But he has a very high football IQ on top of all the physical traits.
Felix, where you have him at?
Yeah, I have him in my top 10. I actually have him at 7.
Okay.
He's really close to my number 6. And honestly, pretty close to number 8. I have him just over Ricky Pearsall.
Okay, that's right. He had Pearsall as 8 for you. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think Dalton really nailed it. I mean, all the physical traits are definitively there. I think something that really sticks out to me was uh off his release, how he stacks on corners is impressive because he eats up so much ground like right away.
Strider.
And yeah, he's a
Yeah.
strider for sure. And like that's something that really sticks out to me because if you aren't anticipating how particularly fast he is as a cover guy, he's like on you in a heartbeat and you're like, oh, like what am I gonna do? Like right there you have to decide how you're going to adjust your coverage on them.
Once you do,
And
he exploits it.
yeah, and he knows how to exploit it very well. I had him at I said 7, right? Yeah, I had him at 7. Because I think something I noticed was he there's some like I think his ball tracking's a little suspect. There are moments where like he's running deep and uh I don't know, it just seems like he's not really positioning himself in the best spot to go and like secure it and lock that catch in for a big gain. And then I think another thing was, and it kind of relates to that, even though he has the physical traits, even though he's definitively a quick, twitchy type of player, if he's in like sticky man coverage situations and that guy's on his hip the whole time on a deep route, I don't know. It's like he kind of, I don't want to say his effort like diminishes, but it's like he just becomes less effective if a dude is on him. So I know it sounds stupid, but it's like if he's covered really well and he's deep,
He
he
might not
he's
uncover
probably not
himself.
catching
Like
that
he's
ball. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
He's not pacing and ball tracking, looking over his shoulder and like trying to get himself where, he's gonna maybe he has to stop because the ball's a little short. So he jumps up,
Right.
bodies with his back to the guy, catches it. He doesn't judge that very well. So it's like it kind of limits, I think, the ceiling of what he could be. Because he has all the physical traits for sure.
Yeah, so for me, I'll just say now I have him at 4. So he is my receiver 4. And the main reason for that is everything you guys said I think is pretty accurate. I think, and I can't take credit for this comp, it's something I heard and then kind of agreed with. I think before he catches the football specifically, so everything to do with route running, everything like that, he is very much CeeDee Lamb to me. Like everything, like the nuance of things, the pacing of his routes, the faster, like the fact that he's faster than he appears on tape at times. I think the smoothness of his movements is kind of why. And there's a guy that we'll talk about later, that also I think is faster than I thought, and it's because of how smooth his movements are. It doesn't look like he's running as fast as maybe he should be, but he is, I think, a lot of the time. The down the field stuff, it's interesting because he had the 5th highest average depth to target in this class. However, a lot of that was just because he was running a lot of 20, 30-yard routes. Like it was a lot of like that type of stuff. Not so much like 50, 60-yard routes, is more so like the 20, 30, like kind of that mid deep range. And I think his tracking is definitely the thing that he needs to improve upon if he wants to make good on this 4th ranking. I'm kind of betting on the fact he has the size for it, and I've seen him do it a couple times. Like I think he can get to that point. He didn't get a lot of contested catch opportunities. He actually got half as many as Worthy got at Texas. So like they weren't targeting him a lot in the situations. Maybe that was part because of the fact he doesn't handle it super well. But I do think I'm gonna bet on the fact that I think this guy could be one of the better route runners in the league pretty quickly. And also the effort level, I think one of you guys touched on a little bit too. I think Felix, maybe you mentioned it. There's a lot of plays, and people have been talking about this ever since the combine because more guys are watching him again. There's a lot of plays where it seems like he just doesn't really run his route or does what he's supposed to do. But I think it's because of the way the Texas offense works. Like he knows he's not getting the football, so he just doesn't like finish the route, which that looks bad on film. But I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing because I don't think he's going to not run his route if he's expecting the football, or if he might get the football in progression. Like I didn't see anything that makes me think that. So I'm not as worried about those other guys, but I have him at 4. It's very close. Like I think all of the 3 guys after him all have a case as well to a certain degree. But I decided to go with him just because of the route running thing. It's really hard not to notice how great he is at that. So, so I think that takes care of. Now we're all up through like 8 now. I think, right? Everybody's talking about their first 3 guys. Did you have someone at 8, Dalton? We didn't talk about.
I actually had someone.
I have somebody at 8.
Oh, is yours too, Felix?
I was gonna say I didn't talk about my number 9.
Oh, I thought you got your number. Who's your
Yeah,
number 9?
no, I'm sorry. I realized it just
Okay,
now.
yeah.
But
Who's your number 9 then?
my number 9 is Malik Washington. I
Ooh,
yeah, I
okay.
liked. I don't know what it was. I just like came away from watching his film and just being like, I really like this football player. Like, he's just a dog. And I think I saw somebody say it. I think it was like might have been Daniel Jeremiah or someone, but they said like he is very similar in their mind to like what Zay Flowers presented in terms of like the size, the route running combination, and like the polish there. And obviously he's not the biggest target and everything like that, but in watching him, I just felt like he was incredibly polished. And then for him to be at that size and be the reliable volume like receiver he was, because I think he had like 110 catches.
152 targets. I think it was 138, somewhere around there.
Yeah, which when you think about it is just insane because he's not just small, but he's playing at UVA, which has never had like a good passing game like since I've been alive. And he's again, it's one of those offenses where he is particularly the
He was
threat
the
that
offense. They funneled their offense through him in the passing game.
Exactly.
At 5
As a
foot,
defensive
like 8.
coordinator, yeah, as a defense coordinator, it's like we got to shut down him, and then we could be good, And I just I came away very impressed in terms of the polish in his route running, the way he's able to work man coverage really well. I think he was very comfortable in zone as well, and he just seems like a guy he's just gonna find a way to get open. I don't know if like athletic wise, and then of course he's only like 5'8", 5'7".
Super well at the combine.
He
did
He
super
did.
well, and it looks like it on
But
tape.
for him to be, at his height, I think it makes it ideal. So I just don't think the ceiling is going to be as as high as some of the other guys that I have in my top 10. But I just came away really liking his game, so I had to have him in my top 10.
Do either of you have him in your top 10? Because if not, I wanted to talk about him real quick, and we can get to.
I don't.
Okay. He's so if we're just going off of like slot receiver versus outs, like he's I think he's the best pure slot. Like there's guys who can play in the slot that I think are better receivers, but I think if you're talking about a pure like this guy is a slot only player, most likely he's I think pretty easily the best at just that aspect of it. Like to be able to handle the workload he handled and his contact balance at his size, like he runs after the catch like he's running back. He really does for a guy his size. Like honestly, I think he's closer to like Debo after the catch than Malachi Corley is in some ways. Not in the same like size aspect. Like I don't think you're going to hand him the football or anything, but like his contact balance in particular was something that kept like showing out to me every time I watched more of him. So I definitely agree with him. I think I had him it was 13. Just because, again, like the slot only kind of makes it a little less of a ceiling, like you talked about, Felix. But this is a guy who could end up catching 70, 80 balls in a year or two, and I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. Like, it just wouldn't be. So I'm being pretty effective doing that.
Just to add a quick note, Shane, that's actually something I wrote down was that to me, he's more Malachi Corley than Malachi Corley is. Just in terms of like
the run after catch stuff.
But like,
and he's a better receiver by a lot. Yeah,
from the receiver standpoint, he's fantastic. So really like him. Yeah,
absolutely. So Dalton, I think you said you actually have your 8 to still say, right?
Yeah. So my 8th, it's a guy we've talked about a lot in our mocks. Ladd McConkey from Georgia. Got him an 8.
Yeah.
The thing that I really like about him is just that you can kind of put him anywhere. You can stick him inside, you can stick him outside, and he can really get open in a lot of different ways. Great in a scramble drill. He's really good at finding space, and he's another guy that is kind of a sneaky athlete. He's not a pure burner by any means, but he's got a lot more speed than I think people thought he would. I just think he's not super physically imposing, but what's up, Shane?
It's just the fact that you said sneaky athlete. I'm like, we're gonna get 20 of those on draft day with him.
Oh,
It's gonna be
God,
20.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're wrong, Dalton, but it's that we're gonna get 20. Like, "Yeah, he's a sneaky athletic young man. Let me tell
Yeah.
you what. No, yeah, go ahead, continue. Sorry.
No, but I mean that's pretty much like, yeah, that's the big thing with him. He's just got really good instincts for finding the ball, and yeah, the only thing is he's just not very physically imposing and not
No.
and he's just not a super elusive route runner. I think he's way better against zone than man. I think he's really good on those zone beater routes, but yeah, when he gets a good athletic corner on him, he's going to struggle to get away, and that's kind of the only thing that I think is keeping him from, really getting up into that next tier of receivers for me. But I mean, like, I think some team like the Chiefs is going to get him late in the first round, and he's going to be a secondary option, and he is just going to kill teams on third down.
Yeah, that seems to be the place a lot of people are kind of hoping that he goes to. If you're a fan of the Chiefs, at least, if you're not, they don't want him to go there. So where do you guys have him in your top 10? Assuming you have him in your top 10, do you guys?
I have him at 5.
Give it 5, okay.
Yeah.
And Felix, where do you have him at?
I'm always
There you
muted.
Yeah.
I actually have Lad at 4.
Okay. All right.
All right.
So
Yeah.
I have him at 6. So Dalton, you're actually the low man on him in this group, which is not a
Interesting.
problem. So my thing, I'll just mention with Lad first because I have him the second lowest actually, which is interesting. I think in terms of pure ability to accelerate out of your routes and accelerate after the catch, there's only one player in this class that does it better, and he's higher on the list for that reason. Like, there's only one other dude in this class that once the ball's in his hands, changes direction and accelerates through that as well as McConkey does. And you talked about it, Dalton. I think if he can get into a situation where he's either inside or as Z or he's not getting pressed, if he can get away from a corner early, it's over. They just aren't going to be able to run with him, especially once he gets into his breaks and gets the ball in his hands. There's so many times I remember seeing on tape where he catches the ball in space and just turns and goes, and everyone looks so much lower than him. It's just noticeable. They cannot accelerate with him, and it allows him to run away from guys that maybe you don't think he's that much faster than them because of the head start he gets by just being that explosive with his first couple steps. It elevates his speed, honestly, on tape compared to even when he ran, which he ran really well too at the combine, which did make me think that, okay, now guys are going to believe in the speed and the acceleration. But again, like you talked about sneaky athlete, I don't think there's anything sneaky about him at this point. I think everybody knows now that he did what he did at the combine and going back and watching him, it will surprise nobody if he's drafted very high. And honestly, he is very productive, probably, depending on where he goes. Anything you guys wanted to add with him?
Yeah, I'll jump in really fast just because I have him at 4. So I have him.
You gotta really sell it on. No, I don't care.
I really just think he of like top 5 players that I have at the position, top 10, like I just think he's going to naturally translate to the NFL level. And I feel like if he's going to be an outside guy for you, if he's going to be in the slot, even if you want to move him in the backfield and make him like a mismatch somehow and be creative in that regard, he's just incredibly twitchy. He's so sudden. I think he's really, really savvy in terms of just knowing when to time like his breaks, his head movements, shoulder dips, like whatever it is. Like he uses everything in order to like maximize just breaking someone's ankles, and it's just like I came away just really impressed, and I felt like I would not be surprised if he's that guy that maybe people sleep on a little bit. He goes somewhere and then ends up not just like being a factor and being a contributor, but ends up being one of the better players on the offense because he's just getting open all the time, and I think the fact that he had such good numbers at the combine shows that there's not just that awesome twitchiness in, whether it's in space running or out or whatever it is, but it shows that he's got like good top end speed as well. So, if you want to, he's going to have to like refine things in terms of like handling press coverage, handling someone that's like really on him and really understanding the things that I said, like, Mitchell wasn't necessarily good at, like if I have this guy that's on my hip, how am I going to position myself to make sure I get the ball? But I feel like he's just such a tough player too that he's just going to figure that out and he's going to excel. And just being such a reliable player and, to be on an offense that's pretty solid that had Brock Bowers and then the next guy was him. It's just like, either of them are going to get the ball likely. And he still got the ball. He was still getting open, and that was the thing for me. I just ultimately was like, this guy just gets open so often and he's so savvy with it. And I just think wherever he ends up going, even if he doesn't have like a, sensational, like crazy statistical career, I think I could see Lad playing like a long time in the NFL and finding a role like on whatever team he's with and being a contributor, even if he's like a solid receiver 3 or 4. Like I just think, especially you get him in the second or third round, probably not the third. He's going to go like high, but
I think
if you get him in the
second
second,
is his floor, but yeah.
yeah, you get him in the high second or something like that. Like I think you're getting a guy that is going to contribute to your offense. So the guessing game kind of goes away with him.
Anything you wanted to add there, Jake?
Yeah. I have him at 5, so right in between you guys. I think you guys have pretty much hit the nail on the head. But one of the things I did want to mention that Felix brought up was in his route running, the way that he is able to work a cornerback and just time his routes and get himself open. He does a lot of real nice head movements. That was one of the things that just really stuck out was his ability to manipulate a cornerback. He's a big yards after catch threat. I think he's got to be better against hard press coverage, which is why I think he'll spend maybe more time on the inside. But I mean, to me, he just does everything that I would want a prospect receiver to do. He doesn't, he's not up there for me with the top 3 guys, but putting him at 5 here, I feel pretty confident with.
Fair enough. All right. I think now everyone does have at least their first 3 guys talked about. So I'm going to move to my number 7 at this point. I think that Felix is going to want to chime in on this one because if I remember correctly, he's a very big fan of this guy. Keon Coleman is my number 7 receiver. I don't know where you guys have him before I talk about him, just so we keep track of that. But where do you have him, Bellum? Same? 7? Jake?
6.
6. Okay. Felix?
He's at 6 for me.
6. Okay. So we're actually not as far apart as I thought. Just the Keon Coleman spiel. So I want to like him more, and there's certain things about his game that makes me think that it's going to work out. And the 40 time I don't care about because he ran really well in the drills. Like he clearly is more of a game speed guy. I don't really care about that. It's 2 things that kind of bother me a little bit. It's at times it kind of looks like he's just kind of out there trying to out athlete people. And I don't know if the route running is at a point where I'm comfortable giving him a lot of targets that aren't contested catch targets. And the problem is, as at least this past year, now a lot of this I will say is kind of on the quarterback play a little bit. 10 for 30, I think it was in contested catch situations this year. Led the class, I believe, in contested catch targets and had one of the worst rates. Not great going into your draft season, but again, I'm not going to blame him for all of that. I definitely think that he is more than capable of being a great contested catch receiver. It just didn't really happen for him this year. Ultimately, I'll be very surprised if he isn't at least a good player, but his variance for me, because of the fact that some of the things that he's supposed to be the best at, or is supposed to be his best traits, didn't shine through this year, does make me worry a little bit about the long-term ceiling of him and like how good of a player he can be. Like, could he be a 1? I don't personally think so. I think he could be a great 2 if given the right opportunity. But again, he's going to have to improve upon the things that I kind of was expecting him to be already good at that maybe he isn't as good as I wanted him to be. So that's kind of my spiel on Keon. But I think, Dalton, you said you have him at 7 too, right? So what are your thoughts on him?
Kind of very similar. Like you said, I want to like him a lot more. It's just he makes it difficult. A comp that I have for him as a prospect, and purely as a prospect, I'm not saying it's going to go this badly, but he gives off Rashad Bateman vibes a little bit to an extent. And like, I think the idea, and I love Bateman as a prospect. I thought he was going to be really, really good, and it just hasn't worked out. And I'm worried that could happen with him. But I mean, you watch him play, it's hard not to like a lot about him. And I mean, and then his size is a big part of it. Like his size and athleticism, he uses his body really, like he moves his body really well. Yeah, there's just a lot to like about him as a prospect, but there are some really rough warning signs that it could be bad.
Yeah, I think I'm right with you on that too. Like I said, there's just enough red flags on tape for me where I'm like, I want to see more than what he showed me, but the potential is going to keep him up in this territory for me, even though if maybe he didn't play as a top 10 receiver this year in this class. But so what did you guys, and I feel like you have him at 6, and then I think Jake, you said you have him at what was it again? At 6 too.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you guys are probably similar. Do you guys have any extra thoughts you want to throw on Keon here, since you guys have a little bit higher?
You guys again pretty much hit the nail on the head, but he's definitely got to be a better route runner. Or just more creative in the way he runs routes. That's the reason he's lower than some other guys on my list. But he's one of those guys where it's, you could just be like, screw it, he's down there somewhere, and just chuck it down the field. But yeah, I mean, his potential is what has him at 6 for me. His inability to do too much outside of that has him not being higher on my list. And I agree, there is definitely some red flags, but I think the potential for me is enough.
Yeah, I agree, Jake. I think that's part of why I had him at 6 and just outside top 5, because I think there's so much potential in what he could become. But I think why I had him at 6 and not lower or anything like that is the physical traits are definitely there, and I think everything else to an extent can get coached up. So I think he may not have as immediate an impact as we've seen some rookie receivers have, regardless of where they've been drafted. When they get to the NFL, he may not have that level of impact right away, but I could see him being a maybe second or third year like breakout player. So in terms of picking him, you might be banking on something. And that's just to say, if he's not coached up and learning and translating it his rookie year, like maybe it just clicks and he starts taking off like in that first season. But the stuff in terms of like his route running, and then I don't know, I think about like his footwork and his route running, things like just how I think you said it, Shane, like he tried to out athlete everyone.
He was trying to out physical people, and like in college it works for him a lot of the time. But again, you guys were talking about the contested catch, like throw it down to him somewhere. Again, I'm not going to blame it all on him, because I do think he didn't get a lot of good looks in contested catch situations, but he did not come down with most of them, not even half of them, right? And you hope that will change at the next level. And I think it's going to be a quarterback play thing for him especially, but it's again, I think the ultimate thing with him, and what I think we all kind of agree on, is I wanted to see more out of him than we got, right? I wanted to see more than what we got from him, and you hope that once he gets to the next level, a lot of that will click if he has good quarterback play. But there's no guarantee of that. Like, I don't know how early he's going to go. I think the NFL likes him a lot because of the athletic traits and his size and everything, but it's still going to be a crapshoot to like whether he's going to be able to produce early on. I think it is really going to be a lot to do with who's throwing him the ball, not just like how good the passing offense is. So, but any other thoughts on him before we move on here? Okay, so round the horn real quick. I did want to I do have my number 8 receiver I forgot to talk about. Just going to mention that. That's my fault. I'm going to mention him now, and if he's in your top 10, then we can talk about him. Xavier Legette is my number 8 out of South Carolina. To me, this is the perfect example of a guy that's like, okay, you need someone on the outside who's just going to be able to run away from guys and stack and be physical. That's kind of what I view him as, is like if you need an outside receiver and a run after catch threat receiver, you can kind of do both of those things. I love his physicality. I think the speed definitely showed out at the combine. I think that matches his tape from this past year. The biggest concerns with him, I think, are obviously the late bloomer type of thing, where you're worried a little bit of like, where's this been for the whole time he's been in college? Is it just taking him this long to get there? I do think that the comments on his work ethic that I've heard from like his coaches and from people diving into that makes me think that it just kind of took him this long for it all to come together. Like it's not a lack of ability thing. It's more of just took him some time to figure things out. The route running is definitely kind of iffy still, I would say. Like I think using him as a vertical threat early on is where he's going to make his money, and then also as a guy you can throw the ball to on screens, allow him to get downhill running, is because again he does have a lot of size despite being a little bit shorter than we expect him to be, a little over 6'1", but he kind of has that stocky, difficult to tackle kind of build because of it. Love a lot of the things about him. I do think because of the lack of route running nuance at this point, and he's a late bloomer as a player, kind of keeps him from climbing up farther than this. But I wouldn't be surprised if he outproduces some of the guys I have ahead of him. So, but do you guys have him in your top 10, any of you?
I did not.
Okay.
Yeah,
for me.
Gotcha.
I had him. He was kind of like 10B with Xavier Worthy for me.
Yeah, I know I'm a little bit higher on him than I think a lot of people are. I love the physicality aspect of things and the speed. And I know I'd mocked him to the Steelers in the second round in a mock draft that I did recently because I think that we could really use an upgrade as a run after catch player because even though Pickens had a better year, I still think it's not his natural kind of game. And Deontay is maybe not going to be on the team from what I heard recently with trades and stuff. I think somebody like that could really upgrade like the screen game and like I said, the vertical ability, stuff like that. But I get it if you guys are kind of lower on him than I am. So I had him in 8. So that was my 10 through 7. Anybody that haven't talked about through 10 through 7 at this point?
I haven't talked about my number 7.
Okay, who's your number 7 then, Jake? Yeah.
Troy Franklin.
So that's where Troy falls in. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So if he's at 7, does anyone else have him in the top 10?
I have him at 4.
Okay. And then Felix, I know you liked him a lot, I thought, right? Do you have him in the top 10?
Franklin is the one. I think in our first episode I said it was like too high.
Oh, that's right. I thought that was opposite. That was opposite.
Yeah, no, he's not in my top 10.
Okay, gotcha. So you and I are on kind of the same page, and then Dalton and Jake can then talk about him. So Jake, you talk about him first because you have him at 7. You said.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. He's one of those guys that I've kind of seen everyone have a different opinion on him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's evident here with you guys having him outside and then Dalton at 4. But and the thing is, I see both sides. I mean, he's an elite deep threat, in my opinion. I really liked what I saw from him against zone coverage. I think he's able to find those little areas that are free in zone coverage pretty well. He tracks the ball well. He runs routes pretty well. I think just with his frame, I think he could be a little better of catching those like contested balls in traffic. I didn't really think he played through contact too well at all. I think he'll need to get stronger, but he does a lot of things really well. So I understand him being outside your guys' top 10, but I also completely understand Dalton having him at 4. He's just one of those wild cards to me, which is why I kind of put him at 7 because, not sure which side to take, but I think he does a lot of things well enough that he should have a pretty solid NFL career regardless.
All right, Dalton. So I think it's you up here. You gotta give us tell us why we're wrong.
So I think one of the things didn't have a great combine, but the tape shows I think he plays a lot faster than that combine showed. And I don't think he is like a pure speed guy. Because one of the things that I saw that I really, really liked was his sudden change of direction. On those, he was really good at, getting a corner running with him down the field and then immediately stop, turn around and come back to the ball or cut right across the field, 15, 20 yards down the field. He was really, really good at that. He is very sudden in his cuts. And again, he's not going to be a guy that's going to make a lot happen after the catch. I would have liked to see him do a little bit more on some of the contested catches, but I think the one thing that he does really well that I think you need to have success at the NFL level is he creates separation for himself. He separates, he gets away from his man. And I think for that reason, he's going to have a lot of success in the NFL.
Fair enough, and I don't really have much arguments with that. I think for me, one of the things that I've looked at in the last few years, and granted, there's no like I don't know the statistics on this. It's just something that I've kind of noticed that I don't love in receivers is if they have a drop rate of 10% or higher and a contested catch rate under 40%, I have my concerns about their ceiling. Right, like that's kind of what it comes down to. And like there's like I said, maybe there's numbers that back that up exactly. I'm not 100% sure, but Franklin falls in that category for me. Barely with the drop rate. It's not a huge issue for me. I do think, again, he doesn't have natural hands very much, in my opinion. I think it's part of why the contested catch thing just might never be there for him because he's not going to catch it confidently in those situations and come down with it. But again, you are right, Dalton. I think in the right offense and because of his separation ability, he could be a target hog type of guy, right? Like honestly, I kind of see him playing a similar role to like I know I'm kind of staying with Steelers here. Big surprise, behind me there. Deontay kind of has a lot of that going on too. Like he's not the best contested catch guy. He does have concentration drops at times. Usually they come in bunches and then he's kind of good, but especially this past year is pretty good. But nobody can really stay with him a lot of the time in his routes. And I think that Franklin's a little bit faster and not quite as good of a route runner as him. So it's kind of not a one-to-one comparison, but he could end up being a guy that gets a ton of targets and just, makes good off of that. But again, for me, this receiver class is kind of the reason why he's not in my top 10. It's not so much that I don't think he could be a good player. It's that I'm more confident about other guys filling in a role in the NFL quickly. So, but I get it. Yeah, there's a lot of guys that are going to fall in that category of not perfect prospects because there is no perfect prospect, even probably not our number one guy, assuming it's all the same guy. But it's definitely a fun conversation with him. I'm curious where he lands. So I know that now I have everybody talked about up through 6 for me. So I want to make sure because it's hard, obviously, with so many players and everything, kind of keeping track of it. Let's refresh up through our number 7 guys. So I have Pearsall at 10, Worthy at 9, Legette at 8, and Coleman at 7. You guys, is there anyone that you haven't talked about through 7 now, at least, right? Okay, cool. How about 6? I have McConkey at 6. I talked about. I know that Dalton. I think you had who was it? 6? 80, right? Jake, who's your 6 again?
Coleman.
Coleman. Okay, we talked about him. Felix, and it was Coleman too, right? Okay, so
me,
I think we're all up through 6 at least. All right, so I'm going to go to 5 then for my guy. Brian Thomas Jr. is 5 for me. Kind of between him and Mitchell for me as far as he was going to be 4 and 5. Loud was in that conversation a little bit too, but I think he's a little more limited than those guys, so I kind of had him outside that conversation. But Thomas Jr. finishes 5 for me, at least for right now. Felix, where'd you have him? I think you were agreeing with me on that 5. You said.
Yeah, he's at 5 for me.
Dalton.
Yep.
5. Jake.
I had him at 4.
4. Okay, so we can definitely have. This is where we're kind of starting to hone in a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
The main thing with him is just the size speed combination is kind of unreal, right? We saw the combine workout, didn't really surprise me. The physical ability and the ability to move the way he can, smoothness of it at his size. I think he came in with 6'3", 209, I think is what it ended up being, somewhere around there at the combine.
I think so, yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, yeah. So somewhere around there, again, the size speed combination. The main thing with him that worries me a little bit, and I have him this high because the ceiling of this type of player with that kind of combination of traits is very high. It's kind of the same thing as I have with like AD Mitchell, but not quite the same. He doesn't catch the ball confidently with his hands as much as I want. Like his ability to go up and get balls isn't as good as I want it to be. And again, it's kind of the same problem I have with Mitchell. We talked about it. Like I think it's there, it's possible, but he doesn't show it enough for me to be confident it's going to be part of his game. I do think he's going to be a catch and run threat because of the size. The route running is good. I do think he has to work on it still for sure. I think the suddenness of his cuts is still something that, again, a guy that has his size is going to not always be as smooth as you want him to be. But again, he just glides down the field, man. Like it's really hard not to see it when you're watching him. And when he gets a lane to run, when he has like open space and he can run with the ball, like you can see the run after the catch ability. That is because of his speed and his smoothness there. So. But let's go to, I want to ask Dalton about this because we have them both at 5. I think you said, well, actually, Felix, Dalton, and I have 5, and then Jake is 4, right? I have that right? Okay, cool. So, Dalton, what do you think about him?
So, yeah, I mean, you guys kind of hit it. Like, it's the size and speed are really, really what jump off the screen at you. But the only thing that I think keeps him, because he's very firmly in, like, my third tier of receivers with AD and with Franklin. And I think the thing that keeps him there versus like possibly being a top 10 pick for me, it was his release. That was the
Yeah.
one thing, because he was so big and athletic that I think he relied on his size so much to just get by people. He didn't like I didn't like his feet at the line of scrimmage to create a release. And I'm worried if you get a big physical corner right in his face, I'm worried it could take away a lot of what he does best.
Yeah, I actually agree with that a lot too. Felix, anything you want to touch on with that too?
Yeah, no, I think he's definitely a highway speed nightmare. He has a lot of the physical traits. Again, I think the top end speed is there. I feel like his work in man is pretty good. I do feel like the things that kind of get me where I'm like, is what you said, Shane, about the hands. Not necessarily a consistent hands catcher by any means.
It's not as natural as I want it to be. His drops weren't a problem. He didn't have drop problems, but I feel like he let the ball into his frame more than I would have liked for a guy with his size.
Yeah. But I think he's also like a comparison to like a guy like Franklin, where like the drops were a little bit more of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is a bigger, honestly stronger player, especially with his frame. So securing the catch might be easier, but you still want him to be able to catch it away from his body, away from his frame. I also felt like he ran a lot of like deep routes and vertical, across the middle. All of that is obviously impressive, but I felt like there wasn't too much in terms of like his effectiveness, and then his like specifically getting open and being a threat on anything that was intermediate. And maybe that's because a lot of that was
the
really
offense didn't
relegated.
seem to want to do that a lot, and maybe that's the quarterback, maybe it's whatever, but that offense didn't really predicate too much of their success on that. So
yeah, so those are things, and then I don't know. He's one player I do want to bring up a point that I find interesting is we talk about guys like you mentioned Leggett. I think was 8 for you, and
Yes.
how Leggett is considered by some like this late bloomer and stuff like that. And I just find it interesting that he doesn't get this commentary as well, because he didn't really do anything until this past season either. And he had this 1 year of honestly like very elite production, but the last 2 seasons he was kind of unremarkable. So I also wonder about like the in that same vein of like, hey, what put it together for Leggett? I kind of think that about Thomas too. It's like, was it because of neighbors? Was it because Jaden took a leap, or like what is it that made Thomas suddenly blow up this year? And was it just the coaching staff saying like, you know what, let's just let him run deep routes all the damn time and run by people? But I found that interesting because he had like 300 something yards. Like
I think he had 700 combined yards in like 5 touchdowns the previous 2 years.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just wanted to bring up that point, because if it's something that's used to critique Leggett, like you had mentioned, like you don't think that's a big deal, but it's like funny to me that Thomas is considered one of those top 4, top 5 receivers, but he's not getting that same kind of talk.
I think a big part of it too is the fact that Leggett is a 5th-year player. I think it is, and also in his later 20s, whereas Thomas Jr. is still in his mid-20s, or not mid-20s, mid like 21 and a little bit of change. So like, I think that's the main reason why. Like, I think it's the age factor, and the like. He has only played 3 seasons, so even though he broke out late, it was his 3rd season and not his 5th. So I agree with you that like 1 year of production is always a little bit of a concern. So I definitely appreciate the little bump on Leggett there. That I will say that. Appreciate that. Again, with Thomas Jr., I think it comes down to like his ability as a player is going to be limited only by how much work he's willing to put into the things that aren't doing so well for him right now. Is all the physical traits. He screams Colt to me at 15. Literally hits every single threshold that they look for at receiver. If they want to upgrade at receiver, if they don't think that Pierce, I think it was Alec Pierce, is that his name, right? If they don't think that he's the guy to be that true deep threat next to Pittman and Downs, like I could see them pulling the trigger there just because he fits their profile. But he's going to go early. I think that early on it might not work out too much. Not in the way of like a Quentin Johnston situation bad, but like might not produce a ton as a rookie depending on what offense he goes to. But I think he has as much potential as really anybody else outside of the top guys. But so I know that he was 4 for you, Jake. So who's your 5th then? Because he might be our 4 or whatever it is. Well, 4 is Mitchell for me. But.
It was Lad.
Lad. Oh, that's right. You talked about
Yeah.
Lad. Okay, cool. So so that was 5 for all of us. So I think we're all up to 4 then, right? Or is there differences? Is there someone we haven't talked about with you guys that's 4?
Well, just a note, 4 is McConkey for me. So
right. So McConkey's also 4. And Dalton, who's your 4 again? It was Franklin, right? Right.
Yeah.
So I think we're all the way up through 4 with all of our lists then, guys. Anybody we're missing? I don't want to miss anybody's takes on anybody. So I know I've talked about all my guys up through 4. Good. Let's get into the top 3 then. I think we kind of know who they're going to be, but the order I think may surprise some of you depending on what you have. I want to let Dalton go first. So I'm going to put you on the spot as our guest for this week. Who is number 3 for you?
So for number 3, I have Malik Neighbors.
Okay.
I have him just behind Odunze, but I do think that they are very much right in that top tier. They would be the top receivers in any other
majority of classes. Yes. Yeah.
Didn't have Marvin Harrison, but I do think
big spoiler there, Dalton.
Big spoiler, sorry.
Yeah.
Give it away.
But yeah, great speed, especially off the snap. He's a very crisp route runner, finds space well. I mean, he does everything you like. Dynamic runner after the catch. I mean, this is really where we get into the upper echelon of guys. I mean, my only things that like my concerns, if you'd even call them that, there were a couple times in press man where you'd see him get pushed around a little bit, especially which for being 200 pounds was a little surprising. And I also didn't like, I just saw a lot whenever he has outside leverage on the side. I felt like he let himself drift to the sideline a little bit too much and didn't give himself enough room to make some plays on some routes where he had outside leverage. And I just like to see him, shove that corner in a little bit and, really give himself room to make a play on the sideline. But I mean, that's one of my biggest concerns with him. So, I mean, that just shows you how great of a player is. We're really starting to nitpick here.
for sure. Now, does anyone else have him at 3 or do you guys have him at 2?
I had him at 2.
Okay. Felix?
I had him at 2.
Okay. I have him at 3 as well, Dalton. So we'll talk about him a little bit more. I'll start here. The reason he's 3 is nothing to do with him. That's all I'm going to say. That's kind of the first thing I need to mention. And I'll read my summary from him for my notes. And I think I did that when we talked about our top players. But Neighbors is everything you'd ever want in a modern wide receiver prospect, pretty much. His athleticism, good enough size, and toughness make him a nightmare to handle in the wide open passing games you see in the league now. His inside-out versatility also makes him a scheme fit in virtually any offense. He played actually more snaps in the slot than he did outside in 2023. He should walk into the league ready to be a high-level wide receiver 2 or even a solid wide receiver 1, depending on his landing spot. The thing ultimately with him and why he's 3 and not 2 is I think as great of an athlete as he is and his ability after the catch and his route running is very good. I still think he has things to clean up with it a little bit. I think it's more him being the best athlete on the field almost all the time, so much than him being a nuanced route runner, if that makes sense. Like, I think the ability to run routes versus the actual understanding of running routes is what separates him from some of the other route runners in this class. But his athleticism gives him such an advantage that it oftentimes doesn't matter, right? Like, he's going to be able to get away with a lot of that until he figures it out. And I trust him to do that. I think he didn't show anything that makes me think he's not a smart player, but I do think he still has things to learn there. And again, he's just not the size that a lot of wide receiver 1s are nowadays, right? And that doesn't mean that he can't be one. A guy that gets comp for him a lot is probably the best example of a sub 6 foot, which I think he's going to come in under 6 feet, by the way. I think one of the reasons he didn't measure at the combine is he's going to be sub 200, sub 6 foot, not by much, but by a little bit, maybe like 5'11 ish and like 190 is what I'm going to guess he's going to come in at actually. We'll see at the pro day. I'm assuming he'll kind of measure in there, but Antonio Brown is the one name that gets thrown around a lot. And as a Steelers fan, one watched him throughout his prime, and then of course kind of watched him also go off the deep end. Do not check his Twitter recently, by the way. It's not awesome, unless you want to laugh at him, then it's fine. He was a freak, right? Like at 5'10", basically, 180 probably a lot of the time, was the best player in the sport at times, depending on the week. I don't think Neighbors is him necessarily. I don't think it's going to be the same thing, but you see a lot of the same like smoothness, the ability to accelerate without while changing direction with literally no hesitation. Like there's no change in their speeds when they want to do that. That's the type of player that can be a receiver one, despite not being the size you typically expect. So I still have him very highly on my board. He's still a top 10 player pretty easily. I do have two other guys ahead of him though. So, but let's get Felix and Jake's opinion here. Why do you have him at 2 instead of, I'm assuming, a Dunze?
For me, they're so close. And like Dalton said, it kind of feels like nitpicking at this point.
Yes, it is. Sure.
I honestly think both are going to have great careers, but Neighbors is he's such a fun watch. And I just think, I don't know, he just has that dog in him, for lack of a better term. I love what I see. He does pretty much everything well. He could be better maybe against press situations. I think that has a little bit to do with his smaller frame though. But, at this point we are kind of just nitpicking. I think that's something that, and even that, he can put on more weight at the NFL level too.
I think there's room for that if he wanted to, but
yeah, he's not going to get a lot bigger, but he can at least improve a bit in that. But everything else about him, I just love. If it was any other receiving class, he'd be my number one.
Like I said, most receiving classes, all three of these guys would be number one in the class. It's kind of insane, honestly.
Yeah.
But anything you wanted to add, Felix, to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think a lot of the positives and everything were nailed. I think he is the smoothest route runner in the class. I think he's just elite in terms of burst, in terms of like I mentioned before, the throttling of the speed up and down, the variance, understanding how to pace, work blind spots, catching the ball. I mean, he has fantastic hands, strong hands. He's physical, after the catch. He doesn't shy away from contact.
Especially after the catch, yeah, I would say.
Yeah, he's an absolute, like, I think he said it at the combine, is like, if a team drafts him, they're getting a dog, and I think he plays with that mentality from down to down. I want to say it was, I forget if it was this year or last year's tape against Alabama, where I was really taken aback by how, like, he was a fixture of the offense, of the game plan. Their defense did a really good job of, like, kind of limiting his overall impact on the game. But every time he caught the ball, his immediate, like, he's securing it, and his immediate thought is, like, trying to maximize the play. And he could be surrounded, and he's throwing his shoulder down and trying to, like, at least get, like, a yard or two. If it's going to be -3, he wants it to be -1, And I think, like, that mentality is really hard to guarantee for a player to get from the collegiate level to the pro level. And I think he is just, like, he's that guy that I feel like if I need an alpha wide receiver one, like the guy who comes on the field and it's 3rd and 13, I want that. He is the guy that strikes me coming into the huddle and being like, I'm going to be fucking open. You know what I mean? Like, get me the ball. And he will get open, or he'll fight for it, and catch it away from his frame and everything. So I just felt like he had a very clean profile. And I'll say, like, my top 3, they're kind of 1A, B, C. Before I started the episode, I actually had Neighbors 1. So I really like Neighbors' game, and I just think I'll say why I had him 1 for a bit, and I kind of went back.
Right.
But
yeah,
no, I just love this game.
We were talking about nitpicking at this point when you're talking about these guys. The weaknesses I have for them are kind of funny. Some of them are legit, I think, but it's kind of very much like I had to find something that I didn't care for. Rounds off his routes, runs off his outbreaking routes at times a little bit. I think it allows guys to get underneath his routes at times. Doesn't always time his jumps well when trying to high point the football. Definitely something that I think is not a strength to his game. Kind of the thing that separated Antonio from a lot of smaller receivers was his ability to do that consistently. So that's why the comp isn't perfect. I think he's more of like a DJ Moore comp, in my opinion, closer to that type of player. Contested catch ability is good, just not special. Like especially the other two guys, I think they do have that. And then lets the ball get into his body at times, but didn't have it be a problem for drops or anything like that. He's got strong hands still. And I always try to make a note of this for certain schemes, especially, and this might affect his landing spot a little bit, possibly. Not the most effective blocker on the perimeter. Not going to throw his weight around too much as a blocker, which not a huge thing for receivers, but it can be depending on their landing spot. Let's get to Art's second receiver, then Dalton, and their third. I'm assuming Rome Odunze out of Washington. All I can really say about him is that he's the ultimate like see ball, get ball receiver. Like if the ball's in the air, it's already over. Like if it's in his vicinity, it's pretty much over. If he's open even a little bit, and even if he's not, he had a 75% contested catch rate this year. That's just not normal. Okay, it just isn't. I understand the offense was great. I understand Penix was giving him a lot of opportunities that were good. It's just he's a different receiver with the ball in the air than a lot of guys ever are, right? And you wonder a little bit about, like, besides that, does he have an elite trait? I think his hands are exceptional. I think that his route running is very smooth, even if it's not explosive at times. I think he's a really smooth mover. He doesn't look as fast as he ran, but I think he is that fast. I think it's a smoothness thing. I think when guys move with the fluidity that he does, it makes them not seem as fast because it doesn't look like they're running hard, right? And I know it's a weird trick of the eye type of thing, but I do think he kind of tricked some people who didn't think he was as athletic as he is. I think the testing numbers are closer to what he actually is, though, than what maybe people thought. At his size, though, again, like it's just going to be difficult for the majority of corners, even bigger corners now that we have in the NFL, to go up in the air and compete for the football with him. It's just going to be really difficult. He's one of those true, like the 50-50 balls are not 50-50 with him. They're just not. Like it's a different level of physicality with the ball in the air and the ability to catch the football in those situations. So that's kind of my spiel. I want to let Dalton talk about him because he has a number 2 as well, I'm assuming. What do you say with him?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit pretty much everything. I mean, his quickness. I mean, some of the things also, like I did like his quickness. And I think one of the things that he does on top of the 50-50 balls, which are obviously great, I think a big reason why he's so effective on those balls is his ability to shield defenders off with his body.
Yes.
He puts himself between the defender and the ball, and then he goes and gets the ball. And he's like, because you guys mentioned it when talking about Neighbors. I feel this way with Odunze. He is a true alpha out there. He is
the prototype X receiver.
And I think, he's just there's really not much about his game to not love. Like I think the only concern I put on my notes for him was there were a couple times where he got rerouted a little bit. Just a hair. But again, he's so good at, if the ball's close enough, he's so good on those contested catches that doesn't even really matter that much. Like as long as it's in his vicinity, he's going to go get it.
Yeah, I mean, that's like I said. You guys want to add any thoughts? Like I know you kind of said it's nitpicking, but reasons to have him at 3 instead of 2.
The only thing that I could even remotely complain about his game is maybe being a little bit more explosive out of the gate. And that kind of goes with what Dalton said about him being rerouted off the line sometimes. But I forgot which one of you said it, but the prototypical X receiver.
Yes, he is. And that's
basically
actually
my entire scouting report with him.
Yeah, that's actually why, like I'll mention it real quick. Like the main thing that separated those two from me, because I had Neighbors at 2 through most of this process until recently when I watched more of both of them. I think Neighbors kind of is going to be at its best by getting moved around and by having to play in the slot sometimes and being more of a Z. I think he is capable of being an X. It's just not going to be using his skill set as well as it could be in the slot or as a Z where you don't have to deal with the press as much. And you can let him use that explosiveness from the gate and not have to worry about that. Whereas Odunze, I think you stick him on the outside as your primary X receiver day one, and he's going to be very good. Like, I just don't have any concerns about it. And again, we're nitpicking, right? Like, oh no, he has versatility. If you're talking about Neighbors, what do you do? Like, but again, like it matters a little bit, right? When you're drafting guys, when we're talking about where you would, like, in the order in which you would draft them, that's when that type of stuff does start to make an impact. Even if the ultimate like ceiling of these players aren't that different, their roles can kind of impact you depending on what you're drafting for early. So, but go ahead, Jake, continue.
That was pretty much
okay.
You kind of hit the nail on the head.
I didn't interrupt you there.
Yeah, no, you're good. He just does everything really well. And again, with him and Neighbors, it's like it's so even.
Pick your poison. Yeah, pick your
basically.
poison. Really.
Yeah.
What do you think, Felix? Anything you wanted to add on his game that we didn't talk about already, especially?
I mean, not too much. Like I said, kind of had these guys like one ABC, and I think for me, the only things that I kind of noted in terms of, that could be like flaws or weaknesses or the things we're nitpicking, like we said. I felt like I agreed with Dalton, where I felt like there are times where he kind of got a little bullied, early on in his route, kind of reroutes him. But like Dalton said, though, I mean, you could just throw the ball up, and as long as it's close, he could get, kind of rerouted or jammed pretty well, but he's going to elevate and he's going to get it, So I think that is something that is going to be a concern at the NFL level because you got bigger, stronger, faster corners. But the fact that he is that prototype X is going to really work in his favor. And then he is a physically athletic player. It's not like he's just a big target. He's an athletic guy. So even if he's getting rerouted or jammed, he's going to find a way to be able to, position himself well, get downfield, use his speed, and then go elevate for the ball. And then to that effect, I felt like for a guy who is his size, I feel like he can be a little bit finesse against press. Like I felt like, there's not really a lot of hand fighting. He's not really doing too much to keep his frame clean. And he kind of relies on the fact that he's like 6'3.5" or whatever to, lean into a corner and kind of get by with his speed. I think if he starts using his hands more actively and he's able to combine that with, a better release package, then he's going to be that guy that like on every down, he could take a short pass and, make something of it. And my like initial comp when watching him, I just kept thinking of Plaxico Burress with the Giants, like the guy who
I like that.
Tall, fast dude, alpha guy at the catch point. But a lot of people forget, like Plax was a very underrated athlete in terms of like, the short intermediate game. There's a lot of plays that they had where it was literally Eli Manning hikes the ball and just immediately gets it to Plax. And then Plax secures it, stiff arms the corner, and he automatically has 10, 15 yards. And I could see Odunze doing that because he has that athletic and speed profile. And he also, next to Neighbors, next to Harrison, like these are the three guys to me that they're like that alpha guy. You draft him and he's walking into the receiver room like, yeah, I'm that dude,
Yeah.
And so I give him credit for that as well. I think he's a fantastic prospect.
Yeah, I think he's definitely a guy that, as far as Burress goes, definitely a guy you'd want to take a shot at. I would say.
Oh my god.
I knew it was coming.
Yeah,
I knew it was going to come at some point.
I'm sorry, I had to. I had it sitting. I was like, you definitely got to take a shot at him, and especially in the Super Bowl, right? You got to take that. No, okay. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about our number one receiver across the board, who I expected it to be. I know, Felix, you said you kind of were wavering between some of these guys at 1, 2, 3, whatever, but it's Marvin Harrison Jr. What can you really say about him that hasn't been said, right? A lot of people think he's best receiver prospect ever. And, I'm not ready to say that because there's been a lot of really good receiver prospect. But the thing that I'll start with this is he is a professional wide receiver and has been for a while. He does everything at a professional level and a professional way. The smoothness at 6'4" is ridiculous. It's just like you should not be able to have the footwork and the ability to change direction and move the way he does with his frame. It's just not really fair honestly. And I will, before I talk more about his skills, like I want to say that there's a lot of people that have comped him to AJ Green, and people are mad about that. Do people not remember AJ Green already? Is this where we're at as a society, as a football watching like society? We
We're
all
We
old.
might,
AJ
honestly,
We're
we
old.
might actually be.
because like comparing someone to AJ Green as a prospect or as an NFL player
It's amazing.
is incredible praise. Like I don't think people remember at this point clearly how good of a prospect and how good of a player AJ Green was when he was playing. Like I know the last couple years the Cardinals weren't that great, but like you go back and watch the early 2010s AJ Green, freak, absolute freak of nature, and I should know. I had to deal with his ass all the time. It made playing the Bengals that much more frustrating and actually something that I had to worry about even when they weren't that good. But no, so I just wanted to throw that out there. But again, the quickness at his size is rare. His footwork is phenomenal for a bigger receiver. That's where the professionalism kind of comes in. You can tell that this is a guy that had a receiver who's in the Hall of Fame as a father. Like, no surprises. Like, if you told me that, I didn't know who Marvin Harrison was for some reason. You're like, hey, this receiver, go watch him. And then, do you think he had a Hall of Fame father that was teaching him stuff? I'd be like, yeah, that actually makes sense now that you say that. Like, that tells me a lot about what his upbringing was like. He knows what this is about. His dad, I'm sure, is giving a lot of pointers in terms of, like, what to do. The thing that I really love the most, though, for him, honestly, his body control for his size. And that's where the AJ Green comp comes in. AJ Green did phenomenal, freaky stuff at his size and weight in the NFL as far as his ability to contort his body, to get to difficult catches, to come down in the end zone with incredible plays. That's exactly what you see from Marvin. And that's where I think that comp comes from because neither of them were burners, in my opinion. I think Harrison might actually be a little bit faster than him in a straight line, but that's not what their game was predicated on, and it does not matter if they're that fast or not. It just doesn't at all with him. So that's my spiel. I took a lot of the time there, but let's round the horn. Felix, what do you think about him as the number one player here?
So to me, I just think you said a lot of like what I was going to say in terms of the size profile matching the polish. You know, it's very rare and it's remarkable to see someone who is at his frame and height that can move with such speed, such, electricity in short area. He's very consistent in terms of his hands. I mean, incredibly consistent. The body control is amazing, like you said. I think he is, in every sense of the word, like just ideal in terms of what you're wanting from a receiver in any capacity, in any way. Um, the one thing I will say, and I think this might tie into the fact that he is this professional receiver at a collegiate level, is my like notes, I guess I should say, and like what I like kind of critiqued. Okay, again, we're nitpicking, but I think my thing was he I don't know, I questioned effort a lot. There are a lot of times this
Yeah,
past year
yeah,
where I feel like he is just jogging. And it's remarkable because like what stuck out to me about it is that it happens a lot early, it happens a lot late. It's like really sporadic through the game. It's like he decides to take a play off here or there. And it's not always necessarily because the play is away from him. You know what I mean? Like I think you mentioned about Mitchell earlier. Like
yes, yeah, he does.
there's
Yeah,
there's times where I'm watching the tape and I'm just like, I'm seeing a guy that's not really like 100%. And like where I first started to notice it was on running plays. There are times where
yeah,
he really gears up and runs downfield and he's gonna go and like you think he's gonna like wallop the safety, and then he kind of just whiffs and the safety runs right by him. And many a times it's inconsequential because the running back gets caught from behind or gets
or
tackled.
whatever. Yeah, but
Yeah, but it's one of those plays where it's like I look at it and I'm like, all right, well, let's say the running back wasn't tackled, right? Like he might get hit by that safety that you just let by.
yeah,
And I want to see a guy who, if he's going to be the alpha, he's going to be my guy, my wide receiver one. I really want to see him like hit that safety and take him to the dirt. You know what I'm saying? Like impose that will and be like, yeah, even when I'm not getting the ball, like I'm in your face, and like I didn't see that too often. And then I also like there's little things that I nitpicked at, like the fact that he's not the greatest like yak guy, and then
Nah,
he
that's going to be one thing I think that doesn't really get much
yeah
significantly better at the next level. I don't think he's one of those guys. No.
yeah he's not exactly like the biggest yak guy, and then um I do also wonder if like well, no, I mean those are the biggest things. It's the fact that I mentioned like there's limited ceiling in terms of what he could do after the catch, and then I do have effort questions in terms of
Right.
down to down consistency. Um, yeah, but honestly, outside of that, I just think he is a very, very good player, and I could say maybe a generational prospect in the sense that like it's just clear that he can be a contributor to a team. There's no
Yeah.
question. There's
He's
no
ready to play. Yeah.
yeah. You draft him, he plays.
I will say part of before I let the you guys talk about him too. McCord being the quarterback really kind of sucked for him. Like, let's be honest. Like, when watching him, there's a lot of times where he was open and the ball should have gone to him, and McCord just didn't get it there, right? Like, just did not happen. And I think the effort level, you obviously don't want to have any excuse for that, right? Like, you don't want to be like, oh, you still need to play hard. If Kyle McCord was throwing me the ball, I don't know how hard I'd be playing all the time. If I already knew I should be in the NFL, I just couldn't be yet. I might not play that hard all the time. Like I'm not going to sit here and say a guy with his polish and with what he has on the line, I don't think he's going to go to the next level and then just not try hard. Like I just don't. I don't see enough of that to believe that. But it's still a fair criticism, Felix. Like it's something he should have done a better job of for sure. Like I did say one of his weaknesses for me was the inconsistent blocking for sure. Like he didn't always put effort into that. And for a 6'4" receiver, I think there's a certain level of expectation of like you got to at least be a little bit better with that, right? Like you kind of want that from a guy like that. But totally fair criticism though for him as far as the effort goes. Dalton, what do you think about him?
So yeah, I've had the pleasure of watching him since he was in high school, living in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
To see him in the state championship game of senior year. He's been ready for the NFL since high school. I mean, he easily like could have skipped college and I think would have blended in the NFL immediately. I think the thing we've talked about with the last couple of guys that really separates him when we talk about press coverage, especially, that I think what really separates him and my favorite thing about him is his release.
Yes,
his
he has phenomenal release.
It is just, I mean, when he gets to the NFL, the only guy in the league that is going to have a better release than him is Davante Adams. I don't think that's an exaggeration, though. Okay. I really don't think. I mean,
I'm not going to argue with you too much, but
it's that smooth. It is just. I mean, it's a lot like watching Davante. The way the
footwork
he takes
is
that jab step, sets up with his hands, and then goes. It's very similar. It's just he is just fun to watch, and I mean, even when he was playing Penn State and Notre Dame, teams that have really good secondaries, he was still. When the game was on the line, he took over.
He murdered Kalen King. He killed that man.
And that's
I know. Here's the thing. Like Kalen, I know he's had a rough draft process. I know it's not going. There's been talk about a move to safety, which is really sad to see. But he annihilated that man. He killed him. I watched that. I'm like, oh boy, that's not good for him. I know it's an impossible ask, but I was like, that's tough tape to put out there to the NFL. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like he did that to just about everybody. I mean, and that's again, Kalen King's regardless of
he's going to be an NFL player. Yes,
he's an NFL defensive back. That is a guy that's going to be in the league, and so like that's the thing with him. I mean, it's just there's just really not much to not like. I mean, in my opinion, he is the best wide receiver prospect I've seen since Megatron. So I think like generational's fair. Like I think for this time period, I think he's the best we've seen yet in over a decade. And like, I think the only thing that I could call a concern for him is the fact that because he has been not only physically superior to everybody, but also like in his approach to the game, because he's been a professional for so long. I think he has been so far ahead of everybody for so long that he has not been challenged.
No, not to the extent that you want.
And I'm very curious to see how he responds to that, because you just never know. It could it could awaken something in him, and he really does turn out to have a Hall of Fame career, which I think is he has that potential.
I think there's an expectation of that because of his dad, because of
Yeah.
the thoughts of him in this
Yeah.
draft class. There's expectations there for that. So
Yeah. And it could he could also he could get challenged and not respond well to it. Not everyone does handle adversity well, because he hasn't really faced any adversity
not
at
really.
this point
No.
in his career. But there will be times like he'll play Patrick Surtain and maybe not have a great game. You know, he's gonna face
He'll
he's
play
gonna face
South
some-
Gardner maybe or whoever. Yeah. So it's tough. Yeah. Jake,
But yeah.
let me have your thoughts here before we head out here.
All right. Yeah, I wanted to touch on something that you said, Shane, about Kyle McCord being his quarterback.
Yes.
And that being a bit frustrating.
Tough scene.
I almost feel like that could have been like the most adversity that he faced.
Right.
in
That's actually I was
college.
going to mention like do you count playing having Kyle McCord as your quarterback adversity? Because I kind of do, but
yeah, but I almost wonder if that kind of frustrated him, and maybe that was some adversity that he kind of got easily frustrated by.
Yeah.
And there are times I did see him miss a lot of blocks, and I'd like him to be better at that. But
yes, I think
there
important.
There were times that I saw a lot of times where he did make some nice blocks. I know that
he's
can
capable.
do it.
Yeah, he's certainly capable.
It just has to be more consistent.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's all I can really say that's negative about him. I mean, I think last year, if you just took him week 1 and put him on an NFL team, he's going to give you at least almost 100 yards a week. I mean, he's really good. And I agree. I think this is one of the rare times that we're seeing a generational prospect in the draft.
Yeah. His sophomore tape is definitely more fun to watch because CJ Stroud's throwing the ball. Yeah, it's kind of what it comes down to. And he probably is going to have, well, I hope he has not whoever's playing quarterback for the Patriots, because if they take him, it's because they're not taking a quarterback. But he could have Kyler Murray throwing him the ball, which honestly, we saw what that would look like with Hopkins. Kind of, I think it could work out really well for him. Going to give him a lot of opportunities, but yeah, I just hope that he goes to a team that's going to use him properly and can take advantage of everything he does, which basically just means not the Patriots.
Yeah, I'm gonna be so mad if the Patriots take him to 3.
Like if they bring in a veteran who can at least get him the football, it might not be bad early on, but they have to have a plan at quarterback soon after they draft him. Which, I don't know, but that's beside the point. We'll see where all these guys fall once we get to the draft. So we're moving on next week to, I believe it's tackles next week. I have to double check my listening, but I think we're going to be moving on to the offensive line here, getting out of the skill positions, which I know for some people is going to turn them off, and other people, they'll be more excited about it. So it depends on who's watching, but I know I'm excited to talk about tackles. It's a great tackle class. Maybe the second best position, I think. I think corner and tackle are kind of competing for second best position behind receiver in this class. Quarterback, I just kind of leave it alone because there's so much crapshoot with quarterback that I don't like to kind of vaunt them up too much, but quarterback's pretty good too. But we'll talk about that next week. Thanks for joining us. We should be back possibly tomorrow night. I want to try to get some guys for Mock Draft Monday. I know, Felix, you said you might be down for it. I might be able to. If so, you'll see it here. If not, we will see you guys next time, Sunday, hopefully at our normal time. But if not, you'll see us sometime on Sunday. Thanks, guys.